to share that. And some more people joining from France, Milan, Italy. Okay, that's great. All right, so I think that we can start. And then Clara and Jessica, if you can check for everyone joining and admit them, and I will start a short introduction about what we're going to discuss today. So, hello everyone. Feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat and let us know where you're joining us from. And I will now try to present my screen. So I will be asking you if you can see everything, but just a moment. All right. And there's so many pop-ups here. All right, so possibly you should be seeing the presentation right now. So I would need someone to, okay, I see some thumbs up. All right, so it looks good. All right, so really glad to hear and see you all today. We know that this is a very busy time of the year, so everybody's in last meetings before the Christmas break, and so we really appreciate that you managed to join us, that you found some time to share some time with us today. So we're really happy to see you all. And so today's session is Climate Reality Connect, and we're going to have a theme today. So we usually try within those quarterly meetings to have some sort of theme where we focus on one specific topic. And today the focus will be on COP29, as in the debrief after COP. And we're going to have a guest today, James Trinder from Climate Action Network Europe, who is the International Policy Coordinator at Climate Action Network Europe, the largest coalition of nonprofit organizations working on climate. He will talk about COP29. How are we feeling about it, and what are the expectations for COP30 in Brazil next year? So this is going to be our focus for today. But before that, we're also going to talk a bit about what we achieved this year. This was a really important year for the branch for climate reality in Europe. So we'll be happy to share some updates with you, some key highlights from that time. So let me share with you the agenda. So we're going to have a short welcome. Then we will talk about the highlights for the year and the Climate Ambition Tour. I will share what's that in a couple of minutes. Then we will have a short debrief from the branch perspective, and then we will give the floor to James, who I believe will join us in a few minutes to talk about COP29 and COP30. Then we were going to have a Q&A, so you will have the opportunity to ask questions to James or to us as a branch, and then we'll have a short closing. So this is our plan for today. And feel free to use the chat in the meantime and save your questions for the Q&A session. So if there's I hope that everything is clear. You can see the presentation, so I will move forward. So we would like to start with the 2024 highlights, and there will be I will be presenting majority of the highlights, but Clara and Jessica, branch members, will also chip in for some short comments about our highlights as well. So let's start with the first one. If we think about the year and starting at the very beginning of the year, our first really important step was the partnership with Ergewald, our host organization. So Ergewald holds over 30 years of experience in campaigning around finance, so finance in the climate context. And so we're really happy to be joining forces. This is a new area for us as a branch, climate finance and anything related to public and private finance around climate, be it sponsoring fossil fuels or actually transitioning to more sustainable investments. So this is all new for us. And Ergewald is providing all the expertise when it comes to who's funding fossil fuels, and how we can and what we can do about that. So we're really excited about starting this work, and we already had some first steps taken, but we will move to the full swing next year. So Clara, I'm not sure if you have if you're out there, so maybe you can share a few words about the climate finance work we have started this year, and what's exciting waiting for us ahead next year.
Yes, hello everyone. I'm Clara. I'm the finance campaigner here at the Climate Reality Project Europe, but also at Urgewald. So I work for both organizations. And we started with in Rome. So many of you probably saw that. We had a session there on how to do finance campaigning. And yeah, many great conversations around finance campaigning. And I know that a lot of you are also doing work on finance too. So I'm very happy about that and happy to join, yeah, maybe join efforts soon as well. And since then, we hosted a webinar also with the director of Urgewald, Hefer Schücking, who talked about more also about finance and why it's important to switch your bank to a greener one, for example. And we have a lot planned for next year about different oil and gas companies or banks. So yeah, stay tuned for that. And with that, back to you, Gosha.
Thanks, Clara. So we will be definitely sharing more at the beginning of the year, but this is just the head start with an interest group set up on fossil-free finance and some initial research that we're doing on who to have a spotlight on when it comes to European institutions. So yeah, stay tuned for that. So this was the first big highlight for us during the year, and of course, the biggest one was the Rome training that took place back in June. Probably many of you were actually trained during that training. So we're really excited that this was the biggest training in Europe so far. The training came back to Europe after 6 years, and we were so happy that it was such a success. We trained close to 1,000 new climate-ready leaders from many countries, not only Italy. So we're happy to be welcoming more people in Europe trained as climate-ready leaders and connected to our network. We established new partnerships throughout the preparation for the training and the training itself. We had some actions with our training partners. So as you can see, I'm not actually sure if you can see any pointer here, but
We
there's
can, yes.
the photo of the end fossil fuels. This was a joint campaign together with Recommend and several other Italian organizations, where we took photos in front of Eni's headquarters, signing a banner and a message to fossil fuel companies to stop polluting. So this was one of the campaigns, but during the training, we also sent letters to 638 specifically, 638 letters to the newly elected members of the European Parliament. So we were really excited to make this training more actionable. So there was, of course, lots of content and information that all the audience members could receive, but we were also really happy to be implementing some actions, and we're going to take this forward with some upcoming trainings coming up soon. And of course, we were really happy that Urgewald hosted a session about finance, and this is something that we will continue in the future. And on top of that, we were really grateful to have a group of 50 mentors who were supporting us throughout the training and also after the training, engaging with newly trained climate-ready leaders and making sure that our initiatives and opportunities are available to everyone also after the training. So this was a really big highlight, and we're so happy that our network is growing, and it's actually going to continue grow, but that's more on that in a moment. And then later in the year, in October, another important highlight was the climate justice training. So some of you might recall it. It's something that it's an opportunity that we hold on an annual basis. And here I would like to give the floor to Jessica, who's the leader of climate justice training, to let us know what was it about and what were the key highlights about that moment of the year.
Hello, so nice to see everyone. So we had only 100 participants, not thousands, but that's already very good for a virtual, very intense 2-week training. And this was for climate reality leaders and non-climate reality leaders. So it's always very nice also to open up the network basically and meet new people, but with the same mindset. And so basically the last assignment was to submit a project proposal on climate justice. It was basically only, really a practical example of how you could implement a project, but we do really have interest in continuing these efforts next year. And some of the climate justice project topics are, for example, disability justice, climate injustice in prisons, sustainable tourism, but also climate litigation, and also working with climate refugees. And so, yeah, you will probably hear more about these during the next year. And yeah, it's an annual training, so you can also still apply next year if you haven't done so for this year.
Thanks, Jessica. And so let's move to the next highlight. So an important part of our work is also support of climate-related leaders-led projects. So this year we had several of them, including publishing a book about just transition in Poland with interviews with various activists and including branch members as well. We supported research on just transition in Kosovo and Poland. So both areas that are very much still reliant on fossil fuels. So it's really important for us to share, to conduct more research, but also to share more information with decision makers and with communities to really understand why it is so important for us to transition, but in a just way, meaning not leaving anyone behind. Then climate-related leaders in Italy hosted some community festivals and events on local energy transition. So we were really happy to support that. There were multiple events and initiatives and campaigns that our UK climate-related leaders created and joined. And here's a shout out to Versha, our UK volunteer coordinator, who was behind that, making sure that our community in the UK is connected, not only between each other, but also with other campaigns and other initiatives in the UK. Now, on top of that, the branch was part of coalition campaigns and initiatives. So as some of you might know, as a branch, we're members of some coalitions of climate organizations, namely Climate Action Network Europe and Beyond Fossil Fuels. And so through those organizations, we have participated in several initiatives, open letters and briefings for decision makers. So in that way, we're trying to stay connected with the larger climate movement and to support existing initiatives. So more on that will be shared in our blog post at the end of the year. But just for you to see that we're also part of some regional work happening and in a larger context, right? It's not just the initiatives that we take as climate reality, but we want to be part of the bigger initiatives as well. And the last and most recent highlight was COP29 in Baku. So Clara and I joined the event as part of CAN Europe and Ergewald delegations. We provided coverage on social media of the event. We had opportunities to connect with decision makers and take actions on the ground. And more on that I will share in a moment when we talk about COP29 debrief. But that's just to highlight this as one of the key moments of the year. So now, before we go into COP29, I wanted to share a few words about something exciting coming up in 2025. So as Climate Reality, we're kicking off a Climate Ambition Tour. And so this tour will be a series of training events, similar as a music band is going on a tour around the world. We are going to do the same with Al Gore. He's one of the main actors here, and we're going to come to Paris. So that's something you probably have seen already. So the first training of next year will happen in Paris in March 28th to 30th. Then we're going to move to Kenya, Mongolia, and Brazil. So the concept here is that all of the trainings will eventually lead up to COP30 in Brazil. And so the conversation on COP, international cooperation, climate negotiations, and overall joint efforts for mitigation and adaptation will be the common thread between all of the training events. And so in that sense, we're hoping to provide this opportunity to as many people as possible. I believe that this will be actually the largest training opportunity of climate reality. This will be 4 trainings in 1 year. So that's really a lot, and we hope to bring a lot of new people into our network. So this is very exciting. And to share some more information about the Paris training, some of you might have seen communication about that, but just to summarize all the most important information, the training will take place last weekend of March next year. It will take place in Paris. The main themes will revolve around international cooperation. So there will be focus on global climate action on the first day. We're making use of the fact that the training is taking place in Paris. So this is going to be exactly 10 years since the Paris Agreement was agreed on. And this is why we want to tap into that hope of the Paris Agreement. This was such an exciting moment and such a hopeful moment for the climate movement. And so we're trying to tap into that energy again and show that it is possible to bring all people on board. And that's why we're going to focus on that theme and keep it with us for the entirety of 2025. And so specifically for the Paris training, the applications will run until end of February. So we would be really excited if you could share the application with your network and encourage your friends, colleagues to join us in Paris. And then for you, there's an opportunity to join the training as well as a mentor. So this year, actually next year, again, we're going to have mentors to support the experience of attendees at the training, but also after the training. And the applications will run until the 12th of January next year. So that's, I believe, all, unless I'm missing anything. Jessica, Clara, I'm just making sure if I've covered everything. We will be definitely sharing more information about that in our newsletter. Feel free to check our website. All the information will be there as well. So for the details and the necessary links for applications, all of that will be made available or is already available, actually. So that's
Bogia?
all for, yes?
Geoffrey here. Sorry to interrupt. I
No
just had
worries.
a question about the number of confirmed participants for the Paris training. I heard some friends of mine received their confirmation of participation. So is there like several waves of applications, and
Yes.
what's the proportion of applications fulfilled so far?
Yeah, so we already received quite a lot of applications, so we're very happy about that. And it's a good point that you're raising. So the first wave of approvals just went out this week. And so we're expecting another waves to happen in January. So we're trying to gradually see who's applying and try to bring also people from outside of France. So as much as the training will happen in France, we also want to take this opportunity to invite participants from other European countries, since we still don't know if we're going to be back in Europe sometime soon. So we just really want to use this opportunity to give this training to participants outside of France as well. So to answer your question, yes, the first approvals went out already. We're expecting at least a couple of them to happen in January. So if someone hasn't received the approval yet, it might be a matter of time. Yeah, be patient on that. But of course, it's best if people apply as soon as they can, because this increases their chances of securing a spot at the training.
Great,
So
thank you.
yeah, thanks. All right, so that's the Paris training. And so as I mentioned, we will share more information in our newsletter, in our blog posts, on our social media. So feel free to follow us there to find all the necessary information about the links and more details. And of course, there's a dedicated website for the Paris training where you can check the agenda, speakers. Although this, I just wanted to remind you all that this is still, of course, very much in progress. So there will be more announcements coming up in the coming weeks with a Christmas break right now. So probably some more coming up in January. So now shortly about COP29, I just wanted to quickly share how the branch contributed to the COP29 conversations. As I mentioned, we were part of CAN Europe and Ergewald delegations. Through that, we had an opportunity to connect with fellow organizations, to strategize together, to meet with decision makers. So I had the opportunity to participate in a meeting of CAN Europe with EU Climate Commissioner Wopke Hoekstra. We had the opportunity to participate in actions on the ground, and one of them was a pay up activity, which was a photo action, which was shared in The Guardian, Reuters, Euronews, Al Jazeera, and more outlets. Basically, the key message here was that the global North countries need to provide more funding, specifically $1 trillion per year, to the global South for decarbonization and adaptation. So this was our participation in that. Clara participated in multiple interviews and presentations as part of Ergewald. So we were quite active and tried covering that on our social media and blog posts, so feel free to check that as well. But for COP29 proper debrief, I will leave it to James, and I hope that James is with us already. Making sure James is with us. All right. So we took a bit more for branch updates, but I hope that's okay. And we can just quickly jump into the debrief about COP29. And James, I guess it's over to you now.
Thanks, Garcia. Yeah, thanks for having me. I may share some slides as well. Here we are. So hopefully you can see those.
Yes, we can see it.
I'm going to go into presenter mode, so please let me know if anyone puts their hand up. And yeah, I've got around 10 minutes or so, 10, 15 minutes. So please do feel free to come in with questions. To give you a little bit of background, I'm James Trinder. I'm the International Climate Policy Coordinator at Climate Action Network Europe. For those of you who aren't familiar with Climate Action Network Europe, we're Europe's leading NGO on fighting climate change, with membership spanning around 200 members, and we're connected to the global umbrella of CAN International, who are around 2,000 NGOs across different continents. We're born from the COP process, and it's where we really kind of come together, and the solidarity that's really visible for anyone who's participating in it. I mean, yeah, like the contributions of Garcia and Climate Reality project in the COP effort is immense. I feel like we have really an amazing opportunity when we come together for these conferences to share ideas and perspectives from across different European countries, different countries outside of Europe as well, and also across the different files, which are obviously quite complex in terms of following negotiations and the different negotiating blocks that exist within the UNFCCC process. I'm going to try and give you a little overview now of some of the, let's say, highlights or a bit of a run through of the different negotiation strands that took place. But please let me know if you have further questions towards the end. So yeah, actually, I'm not going to use that agenda. But if you want to see any of the texts, I would recommend Carbon Brief Text Tracker. That's a really useful resource where all of the draft decisions or sometimes more formal texts or informal notes have been agreed. That's a really good place to go and see the actual legal texts if you're interested to follow up. But looking back onto the COP29 outcomes, I mean, it was a difficult COP. It was challenging. It was mired in it was overshadowed, I think, on the eve of the COP with the election of Donald Trump into the White House, and also the domestic challenges of Germany, where the government, essentially we didn't have a German administration in place over the course of the COP that was kind of able to make the political decisions necessary. But the outcomes then were pretty underwhelming in terms of the climate finance. We saw the NCQG underwhelming us quite considerably at 300 billion, riddled with ambiguity, because it's very challenging to, according to the text as it is, measure the components of that 300 billion and to determine what falls within that categorization of climate finance or NCQG and what does not. We see consistent inequalities in global funding, with loans dominating over grants, and many vulnerable communities, I think we're all aware, facing a debt-inducing system that does not serve them. On the mitigation efforts, we saw very little progress on phasing out fossil fuels. The global stocktake, which is the key part of the Paris Agreement architecture, which takes forward national level contributions, has stalled, as has the design for the next global stocktake that will take place. It's on a 5-yearly cycle. That the negotiations for the design of that have also stalled, and also the UAE dialogue, which is essentially, at least the political part of it, the determination of how we take forward some of the key things that we saw agreed in Dubai last year, like the transitioning away from fossil fuels, the negotiation of how to frame that dialogue, what should even be discussed at technical level, has also stalled, which is leaving us in a place where 1.5 degrees is increasingly out of reach. I included a couple of quotes there from the African group of negotiators and also the Indians, saying that money was a poultry. As I mentioned at the start, the dynamics at the outset were quite challenging. There was growing frustration with the process, high levels of distrust between countries. Also, not only on the kind of geopolitical and national level, we also saw locally the limiting of civic space in Azerbaijan, which made it more challenging for us to do what we do best, which is make lots of noise and point to lots of useful policy resources on why progressive climate policies are more should be adopted. I think, and also an interesting thing that took place in this COP as well was the G20 summit running in parallel in Rio de Janeiro. There we saw the Brazilians attempting, I suppose, to influence the COP negotiations. I may have taken a quote there from the summit conclusions on billions, not trillions, to support developing nations, proposals to create a wealth tax, 2% wealth tax on the super rich, and also the launching of Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty, Global Initiative Against Climate Disinformation, and Global Clean Power Mission. And so I think this is an interesting thing going in this COP, which, I think also with the South African G20 presidency taking place in 2025, so in November 2025, the G20 summit will be in Johannesburg. And already we have the South African president talking about bridging the divide and financial justice implications and just energy transition. I'm not going to go into the same level of detail and to a really intricate level of detail here, but suffice to say, on the finance outcomes, we see, the NCQG did land on an agreement, a $300 billion US dollar agreement to transfer money by 2035. But unfortunately, it comes from a really wide range of sources. It's not necessarily unfortunate to have all these sources included, but unfortunately, it's very difficult for us to account for any of that within the UNFCCC process. There was also, for the first time, more reporting on South-South cooperation, although this remains voluntary. Crucially, unfortunately, loss and damage is not the pillar, according to the agreement of the NCQG, which we'd really hope to see the loss and damage as it was agreed in Dubai to be enshrined and sort of given the boost it needed to be galvanized under the NCQG. And there was a growing role for multinational development banks as well, which opens up a whole range of questions about how we account for what goes into an MDB, what money is spent, and who the donors are, who's controlling the MDBs. Yeah, there's anyway, there's a whole raft of questions going on around international financial architecture, but this is all work to be taken forward. I'm just going to speed up a little bit because I'm conscious of the time, but one of the key outcomes as well was a Baku to Belém roadmap. So an agreement to scale up climate finance over the course of the year and towards to figure out how we can get to this more aspirational figure that was also included in the final text of 1.3 trillion. As you can see on the slide there, it calls on all actors. So it's not about developed countries paying developing countries, is just anyone, any private individual, business, or anything, just count towards them. On the mitigation outcomes, I think I mentioned at the start, we saw very little progress on fossil fuels. Within the technical elements of this, the mitigation work programme did actually deliver a draft decision text, although that lacked any strong link back to the global stocktake, which is that key part of the Paris architecture I mentioned. And we also saw no language on fossil fuels or fossil fuel phase out in the mitigation work programme, which is crazy because it's called mitigation, but there you are. Taking a step away from the MWP, looking at the broader picture, the fossil fuel phase out. So we saw no consensus agreed on transitioning away from fossil fuels, neither in MWP text, the global stocktake text, nor anywhere else. So where does it go is the question. I think I already mentioned about some of the other, like the design of future global stocktake and other elements. All of these pieces, the next formal conversation, all of these will then be at the SBs or the intersessionals in Bonn, probably in Bonn, normally in Bonn in June, which takes place as an annual. And so in June 2025, that's when we'll be reopening these formal conversations. On the politics of it all, developed countries and differing coalitions of developing countries still pretty divided over whether financial matters should take priority over setting numerical targets for emissions reductions and energy transition. I really am going to run out of time answering that. Just Transition Work Programme was also sidelined by the presidency. We did not get to see the things we'd hoped for, such as a Just Transition Observers Advisory Body or an action plan towards 2030. There's loads of opportunity on Just Transition though, and we saw positive engagement on the topic at the second ministerial roundtable at COP29, which is quite interesting because it comes from ministers, so it's political. And there's some early framing, people talking about COP30 being the justice COP, but I think what's really clear is we still need to specify what we mean by that. And we know that equity is part of that, and protective safeguardings on trade and energy transition, potentially technology transfer without profit, for key technologies that are needed to deliver the energy transition, but also things like targeted data collection on marginalized groups like women and indigenous people. No guidance was agreed on the work program in Baku. Again, the next formal conversation will be in the SBs in June. I will just make a really quick remark about this as a key solution that's being that came from the COP, the early agreement of the beginning of the COP29 to see the rules agreed under Article 6, which brings us to a place of some form of rules for international carbon market. We at CAN still have a lot of concerns over this, and we're monitoring the different opposing viewpoints that are going across the world. I've included a link there to some opposing viewpoints, including from CSE India on how voluntary carbon markets are actually potentially really quite problematic and don't provide the integrity, transparency, and accountability that investors need to actually make something like this really function. And there's also questions about where then the money flows when tax receipts are drawn from carbon border taxes and on carbon trading. Sorry, I'm placing a few different issues here, but suffice to say, it's an area of work that's coming from this COP that we need to increase our focus on. You mentioned the actions that we had, and they were enormous and fantastic, and it was amazing to be part of them. So restorative when you've been in a negotiating room to then come out and really part of this this amazing movement that we're all a part of. And in the spaces that we were able to, as you can probably see from the photos, we maximized our visibility and our noise wherever we could. There was over 117 actions across the 10 days, including this one you can see on the right, a really visual. As I think you mentioned, Garcia was like broadcast all over the global media about pay up, and we managed to clamber into the football stand and demonstrating that way. I think I'm going to move away from the slides here. And perhaps I can just skip over to here. But then I really would be keen. I don't know if I've got time, Jessica and Garcia, to take questions, but I just thought I'd show you a little bit of where we're sort of strategizing, looking forward, some of the processes. And I know it's a busy slide, but perhaps I can just talk to just very briefly. So
yes,
kind of
please go ahead, and then we can take questions then.
Cool, thank you. So yeah, we've got the Polish presidency in the first half of 2025 in the EU, and then the Danish presidency in the second half. Throughout, we expect to see CBAM implementation and the Fit for 55 package implementation. There's some key moments in international policy, obviously in the run-up to the bond sessions and the MB Council there on the 27th of March. Also, we expect either in February or March for the Foreign Affairs Council to publish its work program, which we hope will give us some more pointers to something that was promised at the outset of this commission with energy and climate vision for November. The European Parliament, of course, will be very active in the run-up to COP. You can see the ECOFIN committee and the MB committee for the European Parliament will be putting their resolutions together ahead of COP30. On the UNFCCC processes, we have, as I mentioned, the deadline for the NDCs to be submitted, the enhanced NDCs, which should hopefully factor in the stock take from before. We have COP16 resuming because it never managed to conclude in Colombia last November. So it's resuming on the 25th of February in Rome. I think I've already mentioned enough about the SPs, and then of course COP30 at the end there. And then broader processes, we have World Economic Forum, we have the World Bank spring meetings, World Bank annual meetings, we have and some of these you can see in slightly different green there, some of the different EU bilateral summits, and looking at EU-Africa relationship, EU-India relationship, EU-CELAC is going to be a big priority as well, I think. And another UN level conference is the Finance for Development conference taking place in Seville at the end of June. So that's a quick overview of the forward look of 2025, at least from our perspective. Yeah, I think I've taken enough time, so I'll stop now, and please do feel free to ask me any questions.
Thank you, James. Yeah, it's always a lot of information and quite complex. So thank you so much for unpacking this. So if you have a question, please put it in the chat or raise your hand, and then we can give you the floor. And yeah, maybe I see, Vieran, you have a question. Please.
Well, hello, good day from Croatia. First, my opinion about COP, it was one new, very big blah, 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 without any sense and without any reason. Until COP29 and Paris Agreement, we have a blueprint plan to save the planet, but everything what happened after that is weekly. Now we are facing with Trump, in the White House who would allow more coal, more oil. So my question is, are we ready for the more radical and more efficient action? Because going around on this conference is just making very bad ecological footprint without any sense, without any result. Why we lie to each other? We have a collapse of the climate, especially in my part of the world, Southeast Europe, very this year. And at the very same time, why we follow politicians who we know they will do nothing. We know that they will do nothing when they choose the place where they are going, like Baku, and what Azerbaijan president said at the beginning. So I think we need to reorganize to stop be focused on the conference with a very bad ecological footprint and try to pressure maybe locally on the governments, on the region governments, as what we can do, especially now in the case of the Trump and the growing use of the coal and the oil around the world, probably.
Do I answer that question? I have only about 5 more minutes, I'm afraid, but I'm happy to.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Well, I mean, no, I do appreciate your concerns. I feel like the COP process is, of course, yeah, it's disheartening when we see little progress. It wears you down, particularly being amongst so many fossil lobbyists. Every year we break records in that regard. And feeling like the process is captured by countries that have really strong fossil interests is also quite depressing. But I would posit that without the UNFCCC, we becoming either you lose becomes a very exclusive transition process, because the UNFCCC is about the only place where we have lots of small countries and civil society represented from all very different marginalized groups, including a large number of indigenous people, to actually come and have their say, or at least try to. And I know that there are also criticisms with the structure of it, with it being a consensus vote. But you know, this is again very. I would argue that it would potentially favor those that are already trying to evade responsibility if we dismantle it, or if we change the rules around consensus voting. So yeah, I do understand that there's definitely a space for discussion. I think we should feel angry about it, but we should also recognize that we've got some precious legal frameworks that if we don't have them, yeah, we're in a very difficult place indeed. I think trust in multilateralism is something that we must stay focused on, and trying to figure out how we take ownership of it again. I think civil society links is one way forward. So building stronger cohesive bonds with civil society from across different countries.
Thanks, James. And you said
Excuse me, just one very short comment. Why do you think that we need multilateralism as a key? It's obviously don't work. Don't take me wrong, I was part of the team who was working on the COP29 and Paris Agreement with French government. But the point is that obviously it will never be multilateralism solution. We must be focused on the real result, what we can do locally or nationally or regional, from my point of view. We are losing energy, we are losing time. And last but not least, when you say NGO and all these protests, they're folklore.
Sorry,
They treat you like a pet, you know, we have no results.
You know, but that's the great thing about climate reality. We have so many people here that actually work on local solutions. But I think the climate crisis isn't solved in just one, there's just not one way of solving it. So I think multilateralism and local actions and everything else we can do is just, let's combine all of that. And that's why we're here. So maybe and that's a huge discussion. I think that's a discussion that we have to address, but I don't think right now is the right place because we don't have enough time to do so.
Okay, thank you. It's always nice to have, these discussions, but unfortunately we never have enough time. So James, when do you have to leave, you said? Do you have time for a few more questions, or?
Yeah, I can stay for till 20 past if that's okay. Yeah.
Okay, great. So just I saw quickly that we have one in the chat, and then Domenico, I see you have your hand up as well, because we're talking about local action. So About the NDCs, the nationally determined contribution of all of the member state countries. They have to submit them in February, you said. So what can we do as civil society to support that process, maybe also in case they are not submitted on time, or yeah, also to increase the chances for more ambitious plans? So what can we do? Because it often feels so far away, right? All of these, yeah, these multilateral pledges and processes.
Yeah, no, thanks for the question. I sense that NDCs is I think it's obviously it's an integral part of the one-way ratchet process designed in Paris to have ever more ambitious NDCs. I think there is definitely a sense of pessimism following the core new NCQG finance deal that then casts over lots of other spaces, including NDCs and national and NAPs, the national adaptation plans as well, about how we can increase that ambition when the resources are so not really going up in real terms. But as civil society, I think we talk about holding our governments to account on their NDCs and on their NECPs, which was the deadline for which is coming up, the 31st of December. And also for yeah, and then in terms of maintaining, like, keeping a really strong conversation going amongst our local networks and communities about how it's important to see these the national plans improved with the next cycle. So ensuring that you land that message that we want to see more ambitious plans. We also want to see plans that incorporate like a more ambitious mitigation and emissions reduction targets, but also recognizing the importance of inclusivity in the design of the plans and in the design of transition plans and the implementation of them, and also in terms of the international aspect as well. I sense that it might be useful to see NDCs also reflective of some of the international support, be that kind of technological or financial, international support that countries can provide to developing countries.
Thank you, James. And I'll give the floor now to Domenico. Nice to see
Thank you. Hi, nice to see you. So thank you, Jessica. My point was just a little consideration also after the discussion there, not taking too much long on this issue because it will take really much time. But just to say that it's important, I think, in a movement like us to analyze and to, we can say, get passionate, but also analyze the things in a rational way. For sure, COPs are like having some problems. Even Al Gore during the event Rise Ambition in COP has mentioned that, for example, the decision-making process need to be revised. But I think that you have to be strong on multilateralism for only one simple way. Paris Agreement is one of the latest rooms all over to the UN where all the countries can sit together and decide a common problem. And living in a period where the geopolitical conflicts are at the order, I think that more and over is something that at least we have to recognize. Then, of course, we can disagree on the quality of the result. We can disagree on or agree on the way on how it's conducted. But the fact that the Paris Agreement has bring us here all together, has bring the born of youth movements. Greta was born actually in a COP, just to remember. Okay, so I think that we have not to fall into the simplistic way to just attack the COP, but then to reflect and analyze to make it better, remembering that the Paris Agreement is a precious thing that we are, and if we are in this movement, the Climate Reality Project, we have to defend that rather than attack that. That's it.
Thank you, Domenico. Yes, I'm trying to pronounce your name correctly. Pradbo, please go ahead.
Yes, thanks for the opportunity.
We can't hear you very well. It's not loud enough.
All right. I put my question in
Now
the
it's better.
Yes, I put my question in the chat, but something that I feel really is something this group is actually not really focusing on is using IPCC data, looking at it in a much more holistic way. Animal agriculture is now not only was equivalent, but now has exceeded the emissions um, compared to fossil fuels, and I feel that we may begin to look rather fanatic about fossil fuels, whereas the opportunity we have with animal agriculture is that we can make those decisions for ourselves. This is not about multinational actions, national actions, although they are all important, but each time we sit down to eat, we can actually make those choices. And I think we're missing the game here in terms of bringing it right down to us as individuals. I would appreciate some comments on that, whether there was any issue, focus at COP29.
I think I also put that in the chat. I don't know if you've seen that. So I think COP is really a place where every person there experiences a different event because, yeah, depending on what you focus on, it's always different. And so there's a few people who are mostly working on water issues and clean water and on nuclear issues, and everyone has yeah, their own events, their own bilateral communications with different, like with politicians and everyone. So I'm mostly in the energy space, so I haven't really seen much around animal agriculture or agribusiness there. But also, I think, why can't we do both? And I think we should still tackle big companies, as for example, also JBS, and really try to get them out of the picture and try to stop what they're doing, not only with our individual actions as consumers and yeah, not consuming any meat anymore, but also by stopping the companies from expanding their destruction. So actually, back to finance campaigning, that can also be a great tool for getting rid of JBS's financing, for example. So I know a few campaigns that work around that, and if you want, I can connect you to them.
Thank you, everyone, also for your comments. I think we have time for one more question or comment. James unfortunately had to, go to his next meeting. But yeah, before we close off, any last comments from anyone or any of your climate reality highlights of this year that you would like to share? Also welcome. And thank you for all of your nice words in the chat as well. We acknowledge them. We really appreciate them. It's nice to be together one last time before we all go and hopefully have a little bit of rest. Because next year is going to be a big one. Just seeing whether anyone has their hand up. Or maybe you can also put in the chat whether you are planning on going to COP next year. I know that we always send out an participation form because then there's an Al Gore reception also usually at all of the COPs.
Yeah, but I think it's too early to say.
No, I know. I just thought maybe if some people already know that they're going.
Yeah. We know that some already know, and I think that that's the challenge with COP is that it takes it's well, it takes some time to prepare for this and also booking accommodation and all that. So we know that usually many organizations have an idea of whether they're going to COP or not, and it would be good to increase the representation of the civic society in Brazil. Although I think that quite a lot is still unknown for Brazil. And we're also, as Climate Reality, we're going to have some actions during the training sessions we have planned for next year, and opportunities to take action online as well. So yeah, it will be important to track all the Climate Reality newsletters and opportunities to take action, as well as our social media channels, because we will be definitely sharing ways of staying connected to this topic, right? Because COP takes place in November, but it's not just November, right? I mean, this is a process, just like James showed, that takes a full year with so many conversations happening at all levels. And I think it's important to identify which ones we can influence and in what ways. And so we're going to do this as Climate Reality and see and share these opportunities with you. So I'm mindful of the time, and I know that we just have last words and closing of the session today. So I would like to give the floor to Jessica, right? So there's one announcement that we wanted to share.
Yes.
Before we go.
Yes, thank you, Gosha, and thank you for everyone who contributed and who listened. So I just wanted to, as the engagement manager, I wanted to inform you that I will be out of office in January and February. So in case you have something very, very urgent, it will also be in my email signature, but then please reach out to Gosha or Clara. And then I will be back in March. And also the whole branch will not be working and back on the 7th of January as well. I hope it's the same for all of you. But yeah, just so you know, in case you want to reach us, yeah, that we will be out spending time with our families. And there was one last thing. Oh yeah, we recorded the session. So in case anyone asked and couldn't join, we will add it to Reality Hub. And Vieran, I see you have your hand up. We have 4 minutes.
Very shortly,
so, yeah.
we have no intention to go to Brazil. We don't like to develop climate tourism and making big ecological footprint, but we have intention to do same thing what we made at 2015 for the Paris COP29. We have intention to make regional conference. That means countries from Austria to Cyprus, because frankly said, most of the countries in the Southeast Europe, they don't give a damn about climate change on the policy level, on strategic level. So at 2015, we made it, thanks to French government, regional conference on which all the countries accept a common position paper. So we have intention to work 6 months to have a position paper for the countries from Austria to Cyprus and try to go to national parliament. They vote for that, and they have a common policy about climate change. So I think when I said we must be more focused on the local level, I think that we must try to push smaller country to be ready to stand up in the front of Trump and idiots like him and try to do something realistic. On our level, we are working on the green transition, but this is another story, and we have very good success. So I think that maybe influence on the policy lower than level or European Union is something what we are missing a lot. And we are going to have contact with Brazil embassy in these countries in January. So I hope I will call you in the conference in the region in June.
Okay, thank you, Vieran. I think that maybe you can share your contact details. So if anyone was interested in the work that you're doing or would like to contribute to it, they can do that. And I definitely agree that we have to act on all levels, right? So from local, national, regional to global. So as much as we can as Climate Reality, we will be addressing all that and sharing opportunities for taking action with you. So if you have any ideas for those initiatives, also feel free to
sorry.
message us.
My
We're out
base
there.
idea, maybe our
Viran,
forum.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I will have to mute you now because we're actually at the time. So I hope that anyone interested in your work will be able to connect with you. But we also, with respect to other people's time, we will have to close the session now. But of course, feel free to connect with each other and keep this conversation going, for example, on Reality Hub. So we definitely don't want to close the conversation. We just have to close this piece of time together. So thanks for understanding that and wishing you all some rest and time with your families and close ones. And we see each other next year.
Thanks,
So
everyone.
thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.